Hi, it's Sarah from Empowered Mothers Network, and welcome to the second video in our postpartum support tips series. This video, we are going to be talking about caring for your body after birth. So this is going to be from more of a caring for your physical body after birth. So some of the things that may or may not happen during childbirth and from pregnancy, and how we can support our physical body in the kind of days and weeks after. So it's safe to say there are many different things that can happen, and the most common is that we're all going to have some degree of aches, pains, swelling and bleeding after birth. But of course, if there's something that feels not right to you or something feels amiss, then it's still really important to consult your GP as soon as possible. It's always useful to get things checked out sooner rather than later. So if you feel like anything is not quite right or you're not really sure, then it's better to go and get checked out just in case. But in this video, we are just going over a few tips about caring for your body generally after birth. So first things first, when we're talking about our physical bodies just after we have given birth to a baby, a lot of women liken it to that feeling of like being hit by a car. Your physical body has obviously been through such a experience. It can be just, you can just feel completely exhausted on a whole new level that you've never even dreamed of before. And it can honestly feel like you have just been through something like being hit by a car. Obviously it's not, but it's a major physical thing. Even though it's a normal physical thing, it's still a major physical thing to go through. So the first days and weeks, getting as much rest as possible is really important. Again, I think the further down the line you go with having kids, the more you realize that this is actually non-negotiable thing. You underestimate sometimes before you go through that experience and before you feel like that, exactly how much your life does change and how much you absolutely cannot even get back to how it was before, and how you've just got to literally change your whole life and lifestyle, not necessarily for forever, for the long term, but at least in those first few days and weeks, how much you've just got to stop, slow down, and just let your body physically rest, regardless of whether you've had a C-section or a vaginal birth. However, if you have had a C-section, obviously you need to be a bit more careful, because you've had surgery, you've had abdominal surgery. So you really need to make sure that you're not straining that area, because it's so important to let it heal and get it to heal properly. It can be frustrating in terms of when, if you had a C-section, that you have to take it easier for maybe a bit longer than you would have done if you had a vaginal birth. Not always, again, it totally depends on the actual birth itself, but generally with a C-section, you need to take it easier a bit longer. You're advised not to drive for, I think it's about the first 6 weeks. Personally, I think I drove after 4 weeks. But again, double check with your things like your car insurance. If you're going to drive before 6 weeks, just double check that like your car insurance is okay with that. So again, with washing with the scar, and we'll talk about tears in a little bit, but again with the C-section scar, for example, just keeping it clean with basically really plain soap if you must, but just water mainly, keeping it clean, letting it breathe, getting air to it, and just really looking after it to make sure it's healing up well. Going back to resting again, it is one of those things where you will get everybody saying, sleep when the baby sleeps. Yeah, sometimes if it's your first child, you know, you can, if baby is good at napping during the day, and then you can just kind of conk out when they do. Most of the time you'll find that you can't, for various reasons, because either you're overtired and you can't sleep, or you'll be probably worried because it's your first child and you're worried about them. Are they okay? Are they still breathing? Are they comfortable and all this? So realistically, in the early days, to get as much rest as possible to heal, you're going to need some kind of help, whether it is that your partner's at home to help with you, or friends or family, somebody to either do house stuff while you and the baby sleep, or whether somebody can look after baby whilst you get like a 40-minute power snooze or something. Realistically, you're going to need some kind of help there. And then the more you can rest at that time, the quicker you can get back to whatever your new version of reality is in the future. Okay, so what else is going on physically after birth of baby? Well, there is the bleeding. So we know that bleeding happens after birth, and this happens not just vaginal birth, it also happens after a C-section as well. I think I bled as much with both types of birth that I've had. The bleeding was about the same volume and the same length of time after the birth in both methods of giving birth, C-section and vaginal. So the bleeding usually lasts a few weeks. Again, it varies from woman to woman, but just use like normal kind of maxi pad sanitary towels. Don't use tampons, things like that. I use reusable sanitary towels, so I will put a link to the ones I use below, so you can check those out, because they are really good for like coping with heavy flows as well. So they're really the biggest size, really good for after pregnancy bleeding. And just keep an eye on the bleeding. You know, if it's kind of, you know, a few weeks have passed and it's gone right down, and then it suddenly starts up really heavy again, you might want to go and get that checked out. But again, you can kind of liaise with your midwife, health visitors, GPs, just to keep an eye on that. And also you'll have the cramping as well, not just cramping before you have baby, but cramping afterwards. I think some people cramp more than others as well. Like me, I'm a cramper, so I cramped terribly in pregnancy, and even the second time it freaked me out because I cramped a lot, and I automatically thought, well, that means something's really wrong. But I'm just a cramper. I do with periods and I do with pregnancies. So again, just keep an eye on it. But it is normal to cramp after you've had the baby, because your uterus is like shrinking back down again. And it will probably be a bit quicker, I think, if you're breastfeeding, because you're releasing those hormones as you breastfeed that actually do help your uterus to go back down to its normal size. So cramping is normal, but again, just keep an eye on it. Anything crazily painful, you know, get checked out, because it shouldn't be like ridiculously painful, but there is the cramping there. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is tearing. So nobody wants to tear. Nobody does. It was probably one of my biggest fears, other than like pooping in the birth pool, which I never did because I never got in the birth pool to have a baby. But tearing is probably something when we're pregnant that we always fear, and it does happen. Not always. There are things, you know, which we'll talk about in other videos, where you can do things to prevent it. But if you have torn, if you have torn, you know, it depends on the severity of the tear to how much you need to look after it. You've got like your 1st degree tears, which aren't majorly bad, and then up to your 3rd degree tears, which are the kind of most extreme. So you may or may not have stitches depending on the severity of this tear, and make sure you do all the kind of same things to look after it. So not using any kind of scented stuff down there, you know, to wash with, just plain old soap and water. And just looking after it, getting air to the area as much as you can. If you can lie on the bed sometimes, maybe, and just put some towels down and just get some air down there, that's really going to help. If the area is really swollen and really hurting you, you can try things like ice packs. Some people try witch hazel as well. One of the things, the kind of hacks that I got told by my birth doula was after I had a tear, because one of the really worrying things when you've torn down there is going to the loo. So both kinds, but going for a wee can really sting. So one of the good things to do if you have a tear is get like a plastic drinking bottle. So like one of them sports bottles with the little sports lids, and get one of those and fill it up with like warm water and just 1 or 2 drops of like lavender essential oil. And basically every time you go for a pee, after you've peed, just get this sports bottle and give it a good squirt. If you have one of them sports bottles, you say, and you squeeze the bottle, it will like shoot up that little kind of fountain of water, just a little spurt of water. And if you shoot that onto the area, it really helps because it washes off any kind of pee that's still there. Because just wiping isn't really it's just gonna irritate the area more. So it's kind of like a homemade little douche thing, but you can just wash off any kind of urine and get rid of any stinging sensation. And also the lavender helps you to heal down there as well. If you've got a tear as well, keep doing your Kegel exercises to kind of help tone the area and just help heal, because the more you kind of lightly, gently exercise those muscles, the more you're getting the blood flow to those muscles. And then again, in turn, that will help the area in healing. So hopefully you won't need the tips for healing from tearing, but they are there if you do need them. So that leads me on to the next topic, which is the first poop after birth, which can be another terrifying prospect. The first poop after birth is not a fun experience as things go, really. But there are things you can do to minimize any problems. A lot of women as well at this point, bear in mind, will probably have piles. It's very, very common that you've also got piles. So you've got to throw that into the mix as well. You may or may not have a tear, and then you've got the first poop, which is obviously right next to either where you've possibly just torn or somewhere that's very, very sore and swollen. Everything just feels like loose and off, and the idea of going for poo is not fun. But what you can do is just get plenty of water. Just drink. Stay so well hydrated, because that's going to help. Because what you want to avoid, and unfortunately what is very common after you've had a baby, is getting constipated. So of course, if you get constipated, that's going to make it even harder. So what you want to do is stay really well hydrated. Do things like eating lots of fiber-rich foods, so lots of fruit and vegetables, things like that. A little bit of light exercise, nothing too strenuous, but just very gently, maybe walking around, just anything to do to kind of get your stools a bit looser so that you're not going to have to be constipated and straining on the toilet, because you don't want to be doing that. And really, if you follow those just couple of basic tips, then you probably find that it doesn't have to be a terrifyingly horrendous experience. It's never going to be a great experience, but you will come out of the other side